Silent Scream. Unveiling the dark echoes of the past. A psychological horror story. In the shadows of a once-forgotten house, John Carter is haunted by the silent screams of a traumatic past. As long-buried memories resurface, he must confront the horrors that threaten to unravel his sanity. Journey with John as he navigates a psychological maze where the line between reality and nightmares begins to blur. Brace yourself for a spine-chilling exploration of fear, trauma, and the echoes of a dark past. John Carter, a successful architect in his mid-30s, had always prided himself on his calm demeanor and stable life. His days were filled with blueprints and client meetings, while his evenings were spent in the cozy comfort of his suburban home with his wife, Emily. They had built a life many would envy, but recently, something began to unsettle John. It started subtly. A faint, almost imperceptible noise that seemed to echo through the quiet corners of his mind. At first he dismissed it as stress from work. Late nights, demanding projects. It all seemed like a plausible explanation. But the whispers persisted, growing more insistent and disturbing. John would lie awake at night, the sound of his own breath mingling with the unsettling screams he could barely hear. They were silent to everyone but him, their frequency and intensity increasing with each passing night. He would turn to Emily, who slept peacefully beside him, her face illuminated by the soft moonlight filtering through the curtains. "Are you all right?" she would ask when she noticed him restless. "Just a bit of stress," John would reply, trying to reassure both her and himself. But inside he felt a creeping sense of dread that he couldn't shake. His work began to suffer. He found it harder to concentrate, and his once clear visions for projects became clouded by the ceaseless, silent screams. His colleagues noticed his increasing irritability and distraction, but John brushed off their concerns with forced smiles and vague explanations. Emily Carter, ever the supportive wife, tried to help John through his growing distress. She suggested they take a weekend getaway or try relaxation techniques, but nothing seemed to ease the tormenting whispers. John's behavior became increasingly erratic, and Emily's concern deepened. One evening, as they sat across from each other at the dinner table, Emily finally broached the subject. "John, you need to see someone. This isn't normal and I'm worried about you." John's face hardened, a mixture of frustration and fear. "I'm fine, Emily. It's just stress. I can handle it." But Emily persisted, her voice soft but firm. "This isn't just about stress. I can see it's affecting you more than you're letting on. Maybe talking to a professional could help." Reluctantly, John agreed. He scheduled an appointment with Dr. Alice Harper, a psychologist known for her work with trauma. The sessions were uncomfortable, a painful exploration of his psyche, but John felt an underlying hope that perhaps Dr. Harper could help him make sense of the chaos inside his head. During their first session, Dr. Harper observed John carefully, noting his fidgeting and the haunted look in his eyes. "These silent screams you're experiencing, have you ever had any traumatic experiences that you might have repressed?" she asked gently. John hesitated, the memories of his past hazy and distant. "I don't think so. I had a pretty normal childhood." Dr. Harper leaned in, her gaze steady. "Sometimes the mind protects us from painful memories by hiding them. It's possible that what you're hearing is linked to something buried deep within you." John left the session feeling both hopeful and uneasy. The thought of repressed memories was unsettling, but it also offered a glimmer of understanding for the tormenting whispers that had become a constant presence in his life. Dr. Alice Harper's office was a safe haven for John, a place where he could confront his inner demons without fear of judgment. During each session, John's thoughts and feelings unraveled like a tightly wound spool of thread, revealing the tangled web of his past. Dr. Harper used various therapeutic techniques, including guided imagery and cognitive behavioral therapy, to help John confront his fears. As John delved deeper into his past, he began to experience vivid, unsettling nightmares. These dreams were filled with shadowy figures, distorted faces, and a cacophony of screams that left him drenched in sweat and gasping for breath. One night, as he lay in bed trying to steady his racing heart, the whispers grew louder, merging with the echoes from his dreams. John could hardly tell where the nightmares ended and reality began. The silent screams seemed to penetrate every corner of his mind, amplifying his anxiety and frustration. In his waking hours, John found himself haunted by flashes of forgotten memories, snippets of a childhood that seemed both familiar and foreign. The fragments of these memories were like puzzle pieces scattered across the floor, and he struggled to piece them together. Dr. Harper encouraged John to explore these fragments further, suggesting that the screams might be manifestations of unresolved trauma. "You need to confront these memories directly," she advised. "They hold the key to understanding your current experiences." As John wrestled with his inner turmoil, he started to see connections between his past and the present. He began to suspect that the source of the whispers might be linked to something, or someone, he had long tried to forget. The Carter family home was a picture of suburban tranquility, but beneath the surface, tension simmered. John's strained relationship with his estranged brother, Thomas, added to his mounting stress. They hadn't spoken in years, and the rift between them was a painful reminder of unresolved issues from their past. During a rare family gathering, Thomas arrived unannounced, his presence like a storm cloud hovering over the evening. John felt a knot of anxiety tighten in his chest as he faced his brother, who had always been a contentious figure in his life. The evening quickly deteriorated into an argument. Old grievances surfaced, and Thomas accused John of abandoning him when their family needed him most. John, unable to contain his frustration, lashed out, revealing his own hurt and anger. The confrontation left John emotionally drained. As he lay in bed that night, the silent screams returned with renewed intensity. The argument with Thomas seemed to have stirred up something deep within him, amplifying the whispers that plagued his mind. In the days that followed, John's therapy sessions with Dr. Harper focused heavily on his relationship with Thomas. Dr. Harper encouraged John to reflect on the impact of this family dynamic on his current mental state. John reluctantly began to open up about their childhood, sharing memories of a turbulent household filled with conflict and instability. Through these revelations, John realized that Thomas had been a significant part of his repressed memories. The silent screams seemed to be tied to a specific traumatic event involving Thomas, a painful incident from their past that John had buried deep within his psyche. As John delved deeper into these memories, he discovered the traumatic event that had scarred both him and his brother. The screams he heard were not just echoes of his past but also manifestations of unresolved guilt and fear. The journey to confront this buried trauma was both harrowing and illuminating, pushing John closer to understanding the source of his inner torment. The summer sun was setting as John and Thomas stood facing each other in the quiet backyard of the Carter family home. The evening air was thick with unresolved tension and unspoken words. John had reached out to Thomas, seeking to address their fractured relationship and uncover the truth behind his tormenting screams. Their confrontation was raw and emotional. John poured out his feelings, expressing the pain and confusion that had been building inside him. "Thomas, I need to understand why I'm hearing these screams. I think they're connected to something from our past. Why didn't you ever talk about what happened?" Thomas's face was a mask of conflict, his eyes reflecting a mixture of guilt and sadness. He sighed deeply, looking away before meeting John's gaze with a pained expression. "I didn't want to burden you with it. We both went through so much and I thought it was better to leave it behind." John's frustration grew. "Leaving it behind didn't help me. It's been haunting me and I need to know the truth." With a heavy heart, Thomas began to recount a harrowing event from their childhood, a night filled with chaos, fear, and violence that had been buried in their collective memory. He revealed that during that night, their family had experienced a devastating tragedy, one that had left both brothers deeply scarred. The revelation was like a jolt to John's system. The pieces of his repressed memories began to align, and the silent screams he had been hearing were a manifestation of the trauma from that fateful night. The intensity of the screams increased as John's mind pieced together the details of the night's events: an accident, a loss, and the emotional aftermath that had been suppressed. As the truth came to light, John and Thomas's confrontation became a cathartic release. They both wept, their shared grief and guilt laid bare. The acknowledgement of their pain allowed them to start mending their fractured relationship, although the road to healing would be long and uncertain. With the trauma of the past brought to the surface, John's world began to unravel. The silent screams grew louder and more insistent, reflecting the emotional storm within him. He became increasingly isolated, pushing Emily away and withdrawing from his everyday life. John's work suffered as his focus wavered and his once stable performance deteriorated. His colleagues noticed his erratic behavior and growing paranoia, but John's explanations were vague and unconvincing. He struggled to maintain a facade of normalcy while battling the overwhelming onslaught of his inner torment. The hallucinations became more frequent and intense. John saw shadowy figures lurking at the edges of his vision, their forms twisted and grotesque. The boundaries between reality and his nightmares blurred, leaving him disoriented and fearful. His home, once a sanctuary, now felt like a prison filled with the echoes of his unresolved trauma. One particularly harrowing night, John awoke in a cold sweat, the screams ringing in his ears as he stumbled through the house in a frenzied state. He felt as though he was losing control of his mind, unable to distinguish between the phantoms of his dreams and the harsh reality of his waking life. Emily, deeply concerned for her husband, reached out to Dr. Harper for help. The psychologist recommended an emergency session, emphasizing the need for immediate intervention to prevent John from spiraling further into madness. As John sat in Dr. Harper's office, his emotional and mental state was precarious. The silent screams reached a deafening crescendo, and he struggled to articulate the depth of his fear and confusion. Dr. Harper guided him through breathing exercises and grounding techniques, helping him to momentarily regain his composure. In the midst of his breakdown, John began to confront the darkest corners of his psyche. Dr. Harper's calming presence and expert guidance provided a lifeline, but John knew that he needed to confront his inner demons head-on if he hoped to find any semblance of peace. The oppressive weight of John's turmoil seemed to lift as he took a critical step towards confronting his buried trauma. With Dr. Harper's guidance, John embarked on a profound journey to revisit the scene of his childhood trauma, a place he had long avoided and repressed. John and Thomas, now tentatively reconciled, decided to return to the old family home where the tragic event had occurred. The house, now abandoned and falling into disrepair, stood as a silent witness to their shared past. The memories associated with it were both haunting and pivotal. As John and Thomas walked through the dilapidated rooms, each step triggered vivid flashes of recollection. John felt a chilling connection between the physical space and the screaming echoes that had plagued him. The house seemed to pulse with the residual energy of their trauma, amplifying the silent screams in his mind. In the old attic, John discovered a dusty, forgotten box filled with mementos of their childhood. Photographs, letters, and items from that fateful night. Among them, he found a letter addressed to him from their late mother, revealing her final words and regrets. The letter detailed her guilt and sorrow over the tragic accident that had shattered their family, leaving them to cope with the aftermath. The final revelation was both heart-wrenching and illuminating. John understood that the silent screams were a manifestation of his mother's unspoken anguish and his own repressed grief. The trauma had been passed down through generations, and John's own suffering was a reflection of the unresolved pain of his family. With the truth unveiled, John experienced a profound sense of clarity. The silent screams began to fade, replaced by a somber acceptance of his past. The confrontation with the physical and emotional remnants of his trauma allowed him to begin healing, both for himself and for the fractured bonds with his brother. The journey towards healing was slow and arduous, but John and Emily began to see glimmers of hope. John's decision to face his past had not only brought clarity but also a renewed sense of purpose. The silent screams, which had once been a source of unbearable torment, now served as a reminder of the strength he had found within himself. John continued therapy with Dr. Harper, focusing on integrating his newfound understanding into his daily life. The therapeutic techniques, combined with the support of Emily and Thomas, helped him rebuild a sense of normalcy and stability. The relationship between John and Thomas strengthened as they worked through their shared pain, finding solace in their mutual understanding and support. Emily remained a steadfast pillar of support throughout John's recovery. Her patience and compassion helped him navigate the challenges of healing, and their relationship grew stronger as they faced the trials together. The couple began to rediscover the joys of their life, finding comfort in simple pleasures and the bond they had forged through adversity. The abandoned family home, now a symbol of their past struggles, was slowly restored to a place of peace. John and Thomas worked together to renovate the property, transforming it into a space that honored their memories while allowing them to move forward. The house became a sanctuary for healing and reflection, a place where they could reconcile with their past and build a hopeful future. As the silent screams gradually subsided, John found solace in the acceptance of his past and the promise of a brighter future. The journey had been fraught with pain and challenges, but it had also brought profound growth and understanding. With the echoes of his trauma finally laid to rest, John and Emily embraced their new beginning, guided by the strength and resilience that had emerged from the depths of their shared struggles. Months had passed since John and Thomas had faced the painful truths of their past. The once haunted house now stood as a testament to their journey, renovated and filled with new memories. It had become a place of reflection and renewal, a stark contrast to the oppressive darkness that had once enveloped it. John had made significant strides in his recovery. He had taken up painting as a form of therapy, channeling his emotions into vibrant canvases that depicted both his turmoil and his triumphs. Each brushstroke was an act of catharsis, helping him to process and release the lingering echoes of his trauma. Emily supported John's artistic endeavors, attending gallery shows and celebrating his progress. Their home, now filled with John's artwork, had transformed into a sanctuary of creativity and healing. The silent screams had faded, replaced by a newfound sense of purpose and expression. One evening, as John worked on a new painting, he reflected on the journey that had brought him to this point. The canvas before him was a colorful depiction of the house's transformation, a visual representation of his path from darkness to light. He could see the echoes of his past interwoven with the bright colors of his present, a testament to his resilience. As he put the finishing touches on the painting, Emily joined him in the studio, her presence a comforting reminder of the support and love that had guided him through his recovery. "It's beautiful," she said, her voice filled with admiration. "It captures everything you've been through and how far you've come." John smiled, feeling a sense of fulfillment that had once seemed unattainable. The echoes of his past no longer controlled him. Instead, they had become a part of his story, woven into the fabric of his new life. The day of the grand reopening of the family home had arrived. John and Thomas, alongside Emily, prepared for the event with a mix of excitement and nostalgia. The house, once a symbol of their shared trauma, had been transformed into a warm and inviting space, a place where new memories could be created. The event was attended by friends, family, and neighbors, all eager to see the changes made to the house. As guests admired the renovations and John's artwork displayed throughout the rooms, they marveled at the positive transformation of a place that had once been a source of pain. John and Thomas shared a heartfelt moment during the event, reflecting on their journey and the bond they had rebuilt. The presence of their loved ones, the support they had received, and the healing they had experienced filled them with a sense of gratitude and hope. As the evening drew to a close, John and Emily stood on the porch watching the last guests leave. The house, now vibrant and full of life, seemed to pulse with a renewed energy, a stark contrast to the silent screams that had once plagued its walls. John took Emily's hand, feeling a deep sense of peace. "We've come so far," he said softly. "It's incredible to see how much has changed." Emily smiled, her eyes reflecting the warmth of the evening. "Yes, it is. And this is just the beginning. We've turned a page and started a new chapter." As the stars began to twinkle in the night sky, John and Emily embraced the promise of their new beginning. The echoes of their past had been acknowledged and transformed into a source of strength and renewal. With the silent screams finally silenced, they looked forward to a future filled with hope, love, and the endless possibilities of a life reborn. As the months rolled by, life seemed to settle into a new rhythm for John and Emily. The house, now a beacon of their healing journey, provided a sense of stability and peace. Yet as time went on, John found that the shadows of his past sometimes lingered, reminding him of the scars he had once carried. One evening, while working late in his studio, John noticed a peculiar shift in the atmosphere. The room seemed colder, and the comforting hum of the house's usual warmth felt distant. As he painted, a sudden draft swept through the room, sending chills down his spine. He brushed it off as a figment of his imagination, a residual echo of his past struggles. Later that night, John awoke to a feeling of unease. The silent screams, though no longer as intense as before, returned intermittently. The haunting whispers seemed to carry a message he couldn't quite decipher. He sat up in bed, trying to steady his breathing, and turned to Emily, who was still asleep beside him. The shadows of his past, though not as overpowering as before, made their presence known in subtle ways. John began to have fleeting visions of the house in its original dilapidated state, flashes of the traumatic events that had once consumed him. The fear that had been a constant companion now felt like a shadow lurking just beyond the edges of his consciousness. John knew that these lingering echoes were part of his healing journey. He decided to confront them head-on, recognizing that understanding and acceptance were essential to moving forward completely. He reached out to Dr. Harper, seeking guidance on how to address these resurfacing fears and ensure they didn't derail his progress. Dr. Harper's office once again became a place of refuge for John. During their sessions, John discussed the recent disturbances and the lingering shadows that had resurfaced. Dr. Harper reassured him that these experiences were a natural part of the healing process and that confronting them was crucial for complete recovery. Together, they worked on techniques to manage and integrate these residual fears into John's life. Dr. Harper encouraged John to use his art as a means of expression, channeling his emotions and fears onto the canvas. This process allowed John to confront and process the lingering shadows in a constructive way. John's paintings took on a new dimension, reflecting his ongoing journey of healing and self-discovery. Each artwork became a visual representation of his struggles, triumphs, and the continuous process of confronting his fears. Emily continued to be a supportive presence, attending art exhibitions and offering encouragement as John explored these new themes in his work. As John and Emily looked towards the future, they embraced the idea that healing was an ongoing journey. The house, once a symbol of their darkest moments, had become a testament to their resilience and growth. It stood as a reminder that even in the face of lingering shadows, they had the strength to forge a new path forward. John and Emily began planning new projects and adventures, focusing on the positive aspects of their lives and the opportunities that lay ahead. They understood that the echoes of their past might never disappear entirely, but they had the tools and support to manage them and continue building a fulfilling life. As they stepped into a future filled with hope and possibility, John and Emily knew that their journey had not ended. It had evolved into a new chapter of their lives, one where they could embrace their past, appreciate their growth, and look forward to the endless potential of what was to come. If you enjoyed this story, be sure to like the video, share it with others, and subscribe for more terrifying horror tales. Check out our playlist of psychological horror stories for more bone-chilling narratives. See you in the next story.